And so since I became the assessor, I've always had an open door policy for somebody running. I figure the more people know about tax policy and taxes in Oak Park, especially if they want to run for a local government, the more they know, the better they'll inform their voters.
Yeah.
So I think that's, there's a lot of reasons for it, but the bottom line is, I think I would describe it as just overall concern about the high level of taxation, especially the increases. Because I always say people don't usually complain if they have an inflation level increase in their tax bill. They kind of expect it. 2-3% increases. I don't hear complaints. Mm-hmm. But when they're going up 10, 12, 15%, I hear a lot of complaints then, because people, the property tax is not an income tax. It's not based on your ability to pay. Mm-hmm. So you could lose your job, get a 2% increase in your salary, and still get a 15% increase in your bill. There's no correlation between those two. So people can, or more likely, somebody who's thinking about retiring and their tax bill is up 10, 12%. That makes somebody wonder, can I afford to stay in Oak Park with that sort of thing? So the lack of connection between your ability to pay and your tax bill drives a lot of people to file appeals.
Yeah.
It's a dramatic difference between, the level of spending has gone up far more than the rate of inflation. And, there's all sorts of reasons for that. I mean, I don't think anybody's operating in bad faith here. There's, people support public education. A large part of the reason for all that is we've passed a number of referendums, most of them for schools. Schools and education are important to a lot of people in Oak Park. But affordability is an important issue as well. And so sometimes I think I like to put it in terms of, because we are kind of a big-hearted community, and I put it in terms of somebody's ability to pay and the disconnection between your income and your tax bill. Because that's, if you are, say, a supporter of public education and want to see good schools for your kids, it is tempting to say, oh, the people against it are this or that or something like that, to put it in kind of a negative way. But if you think about it, it's like the tax increase you're suggesting is going to have an increase on folks whether or not they can afford it, and it's unrelated to their ability to pay. I think that casts it in a different light, and I think that's a more accurate light. I don't think people are I mean, if you're in Oak Park, you're already paying a lot of taxes. You've made the choice, but the question is, how much of an increase on what you're already paying can you handle?
Yeah.
But I do think that having some limits is, because we're a big-hearted community, the list of needs is endless, right? There are all sorts of things we could do with public money to help solve a problem, or to make our society better. And I think there is a strong impulse in Oak Park to want to do that.
I would agree.
And I think, there are, for some of the taxing districts, there are limitations on how much money they can spend to do that, how much they can raise their revenues. And I think sometimes those limitations are good because it forces you to, number one, prioritize, and number two, to think of new ways to provide those services. Can we collaborate more, or can we use technology to provide a service for less, or can we use part-time help instead of full-time help? There's a lot of things that people can do, and sometimes if, as you say, the supply of money is unlimited, you may not think about that. The village, the township, every local taxing district, the primary expense is employee expenses. And employee expenses, whether it's their salaries or benefits, they go up every year typically.
Yeah.
And so state law allows the township and the schools to increase their levy by the rate of inflation, to kind of keep pace with their increasing expenses.
This is tax caps.
Yes, it's called the tax cap law. And so one of the things that happens is you get this $5 million in revenue, new revenue, but are we going to stay even at $200 million, the overall spending? The answer is probably not.
Yeah.
Because, this year the tax gap is a little under 2%. Mm-hmm. And they're going to get their extra 2%. Almost everybody is going to get.
Take the maximum allowable by law, which is 2%, which again is in most cases a reasonable increase.
Right. So just doing that, the 2% on what $200 million is what, $4 million?
Sure.
So just right off the bat, we've got $500 million in new revenue, but $4 million in new expenses. Mm-hmm. Okay, so suddenly we're still looking at a little bit of a break, but not as much of a one in that example. But then we have a further thing, which is the state law generally says, if you're, I think this state law applies to the park district, the township, and the 2 school districts. The state law says you can increase spending by the rate of inflation unless there's new growth.
Okay.
And when there's new properties that come online, then you can apply your tax rate to those new properties. Basically, you can get the extra money, that extra $5 million for your taxing district. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a reason for this, which is, in theory, if you have all these new properties, you might have new students at the schools, for example, or new users of the park service or township service or whatever the case may be. And so that's why the legislature made that exception. They said, basically, you can get extra money above the rate of inflation when there's new growth. But what that does is, so we're talking about this magical $5 million that we now have. Yeah. Well, if we spend it all, right, if all the local governments basically take their share of the extra money, what do we have left? Well, the tax relief is gone. And traditionally, that's what we've done in Oak Park. We have, I've been doing this job since 2001, so it's 18 years? Coming up on 19 years pretty soon. Yeah. Most times, the taxing districts take every dollar they can under the law. And then that's not saying they're bad. I mean, sometimes it can be difficult to run a district just on the rate of inflation because, health insurance costs go up by more than that. And there's all sorts of things that happen. But nonetheless, there's been a lot of development since I've been around, and there's not really been any tax relief. And the reason is because we have a choice every time there's new development. We can either use the money for tax relief, which is, or spend it. Yeah. And the default has traditionally been to spend it in Oak Park.
To capture
the extra money,
yeah,
yes.
So
And the article, I think it was in Crane's Chicago Business, said that the market was stronger in River Forest compared to its neighbor Oak Park. And I looked at that article, and then I looked at the tax rate in Oak Park versus River Forest. And our tax rate is about 20% higher than River Forest, which basically meant, 2 identically valued homes in Oak Park and River Forest, you're going to pay 20% less in River Forest. Well, guess what? That makes it a lot more attractive to go to River Forest compared to Oak Park. So if we could lower that gap a little bit, by maybe not taking some of the TIF money, I think that would be to the benefit of the community. Because one of the things I have done this year, and I mentioned this in my talk to the township board, is I feel, unfortunately, that I have personally killed a lot of real estate deals. And then people would call our office. They were interested in the house. They liked the house in Oak Park, but they said, the taxes can't possibly be this high, can they?
Yeah.
And so they would call your friendly neighborhood township assessor and see, is it true? Is there some mistake? And they'd look at it, and I'd say, I'm sorry to say that probably is the right number. And I don't always follow up. It's not really my business. My job is to give them tax information. But my feeling is that probably ended a lot of those deals because people are concerned as a potential buyer. Is like, these taxes are already pretty darn expensive, and I don't know that I want to move into a community where I'm looking at a bill that hefty.
Yeah.